Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're enjoying this story as much as I have, and it's a story with so many parts to this fabric because one encounter has led to another, and it seems to be almost generational. So we're about to hear if the two boys going back to retrace the footsteps of their father who had a Bigfoot encounter many years ago when he was a young man. They're going back to the same abandoned house where he had that encounter and wondering if they're going to have one of their own. So we're about to find out what happens next. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with the final part of our story tonight. So you really want us to go out and check if the... I get where you're going with this, Ernest. You seem convinced the Bigfoots that Dad and Uncle Gareth encountered meant them no harm. You feel the same way about Mrs. Sandalson's encounter. And what you say makes sense, but it doesn't mean you're right about any of this. Do you really want to take the risk of having an encounter with a creature you know nothing about, that could potentially be extremely dangerous and do us some serious harm? Even if the harm is not physical, it could be an emotional kind of harm. If there are Bigfoots still territorial hanging around the Erickson place, do you really want to provoke them to anger by going there at midnight? What if they chase us away like they did Dad and Uncle Gareth all those years ago? Come on, Ernest. I very much doubt we're going to have a similar experience to Dad and Uncle Gareth. Maybe we will experience nothing at all. It's been a long time since Dad was a teenager. Those Bigfoots are probably long gone by now. But even if they're not, are you really going to miss out on an opportunity of experiencing a chance encounter? Think about it. We don't have to chase after a Bigfoot. The Bigfoot may come to us to shoo us away from the Erickson property. It doesn't get better than that, does it? Do you realise how many people out there would kill for a chance encounter with a Bigfoot? But they never get to see one, and probably never will. Imagine if we have an amazing story to one day tell our grandchildren. Anyway, if the truth be told, life is about taking risks, isn't it? Everybody knows that. No one ever accomplished anything in life by hiding away from its challenges. The most successful people in this world embrace challenges head on, don't they? Maybe that's true, but this is different, I said. Embracing 4 powerful Bigfoot while exploring the Erickson property, I'm afraid, is not my idea of a fun time. I'm sorry, but it's not. I don't want any of that. If I embrace a kind of adventure, it would be something like whitewater rafting or rock climbing. But provoking Bigfoot to anger? That's not fun. My bet is we won't encounter anything, said William. I meant it, Ernest. I think it's highly doubtful anything will actually happen. I mean, Dad's Bigfoot encounter happened years ago, didn't it? I doubt anyone goes near the Ericksons' abandoned house these days. But even so, I'm still going to go there one night in a couple of weeks' time, after I've finished my school project, to see if anything happens. You don't have to come with me if you don't want to, but I would appreciate you not telling Mum and Dad about this intrepid plan of mine. You know, Mum, she'd likely freak out. And, well, Dad, he wouldn't be best pleased, would he? But you can't go alone to that house in the middle of the night, I protested. That's insane, absolutely insane. Are you crazy? But I can go, Ernest, and I will go, my brother said stubbornly. And I could tell by the resolute determination on his face that there was nothing I could possibly say that would ever change his mind on this matter. My brother could be incorrigible, and there were times there was no reasoning with him. I suspected he had taken after Uncle Gareth in that regard, although instead of being fixated over the subject of the paranormal, he was fascinated by cryptid creatures, especially Bigfoot. I had seen his fascination in the woodgrove when we encountered the dead body of the wolf man, that in later years I rather suspect was actually a dog man. My brother locked eyes with me and said to me very firmly, "Even if you don't want a potential encounter with a Bigfoot, I do. And if you don't come with me, then I'll go alone. It's as simple as that. Oh, so there you go again. You're trying to manipulate me, aren't you? I said, feeling infuriated with my brother, so much so that my cheeks began to burn. Is that where this is heading? It's so typical of you to be like this, William. How can I be expected to sleep at night if I know you're hanging around an abandoned house in the middle of the night, hoping to be chased away by a team of surly Bigfoot? What on earth is wrong with you? You're not normal. I'm not manipulating you, Ernest, my brother said. I'm telling you my plans. And if you don't like them, tough titty, I'm not forcing you to come with me, am I? But you can't go there alone, William. That's insane. You know it is. Well, you can come with me if it makes you feel any better, said my brother with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. I intend to go to the Ericsson house in a couple of weeks' time, with or without you. All right, I said. I'll come with you, only because I'd never ever forgive myself if something untoward were to happen to you. I want you to know I'm not happy about this. For a start, I think it's very unlikely that what happened to Dad and Uncle Gareth will happen to us. But even if it does, I don't think you're going to enjoy being challenged by 4 aggressive Bigfoot. You're making light of these cryptid creatures. You've romanticized them in your mind, as if these creatures cannot be feared. But you have no idea about how potentially dangerous they could be. You're in denial, aren't you? I'm not in denial, Ernest. I'm interested in paradoxical things, always have been. And yes, I would like a Bigfoot encounter. I'm not completely weird, you know. There are lots of people out there, just like me, seeking out an encounter with Bigfoot. If they knew about the Ericsson place and what had happened there to Uncle Gareth and Dad, I bet you they'd investigate the place for themselves like I intend to do. I mean, if you can't find Bigfoot, let him come to you. That's what I say. Honestly, I can't believe anybody would be as fanatical as you, I said to my brother. So you will come then, on this intrepid adventure of mine, will you? To the Ericsson house? My brother asked me. Is this your roundabout way of saying yes, William? I told you I would come, didn't I? I said, feeling the back of my throat beginning to constrict, almost as if the air was being sucked out of my lungs. Just thinking of potentially encountering a Bigfoot scared me half to death. But being the older brother in my family, I knew I needed to lead by example. I should be the brother that showed no fear at all, even if I was feeling it. But it was exceedingly difficult to hide my trepidation about what my brother was proposing to do. I certainly didn't want him in the dead of night going to visit the Ericsson house, on his own, given what had happened to my father and to Uncle Gareth all those years ago. So it certainly didn't sit well with me, thinking of my brother exploring that abandoned house, while I lay in bed tossing and turning, wondering if he'd got himself ensnared in some kind of trouble. I really felt that I was now stuck between a rock and a hard place. My only hope was that my brother would decide that going exploring the Ericsson house was a futile idea, and that he would soon lose interest in it. But I had completely underestimated my brother. William at the time was doing a school project, I'm glad to say, that needed to be completed, and it took up the lion's share of his time and attention. So it would seem our little adventure to the Ericsson property had been put on the back burner and postponed. After 2 weeks had chugged by, with my brother not expressing any keen interest in visiting the abandoned property, I began to finally draw in some fresh air, reassuring myself that my brother was having second thoughts, and at long last had come to his senses. William was obstinately stubborn by nature, but unbeknown to me, he had been researching everything Bigfoot in his spare time, so his interest in the cryptid creature intensified exponentially. I was the oldest brother by about 18 months. I will say this about my brother William, to his credit. He was much more plucky and courageous than I was. When he was growing up, he was never afraid of the dark, and as a teenager, when we would watch horror movies together, William never became squeamish when the characters in the movie were involved in a terrifying scene that would make most people cover up their eyes and recoil in horror. William loved all things adventurous, and if it meant that you could potentially lose your life undertaking something challenging, then as far as he was concerned, It was all the more thrilling. It was like my brother lived on his adrenaline and got a great rush out of being scared stiff. So yes, much as I hate to admit this, he was a whole lot braver than I was. One day William took me aside and seemed desperately excited about something. At this point I'd all but forgotten about the Ericsson property and the nightly adventure my brother had been planning for quite a while, as I had told myself that it would never happen. "What's going on?" I asked him. "Why are you looking so pleased with yourself?" "I've finished my project," he told me, a light going on in his eyes. "So tonight's the night." At this point my heart sank in my chest, because this is not what I wanted to hear, and I didn't have to ask my brother what he meant, because those words were already sticking in the back of my throat, and they actually made me want to gag. "Are you sure it's a good idea, William?" I asked him. "Can't we take a rain check on this? I'm sure you must have noticed the weather is getting a lot cooler recently," I said, trying to discourage William. "It could be cold out there in the late hours of the night, don't you think?" William chuckled. He pointed an amused finger at me. "You're good, Ernest, you really are. I'll give you that. If someone was given the #1 prize for procrastination or avoidance strategies, you'd likely win it." "You've never minded cold weather before. It's the beginning of autumn, Ernest. It's not going to kill us sneaking out of the house at this time of year. You promised you'd come with me. I don't really want to go alone, but if I don't have your support, then I will do just that. And I'm not trying to manipulate you either, but I would appreciate your company, because I enjoy hanging around with you. But if you don't want to come with me, I quite understand." "I told you I would come with you, didn't I said rather begrudgingly. "I just think you need to be realistic. You need to realize it's very unlikely we'll encounter a Bigfoot." I think I was saying this more to myself than to my brother, to reassure myself that our nightly adventure would of course be very uneventful. "Then what are you worried about?" said William, slapping me on the back affectionately. "If we don't encounter anything, all well and good. We wouldn't have lost, nor would we have gained anything. Only a little light exercise on our bikes, that's all. And there's nothing wrong with that, is there?" That evening when we retired to bed, I don't mind admitting that I was exceedingly nervous. I was very afraid of what the night would bring. I had an ominous feeling that history might repeat itself, and that me and my brother would have an encounter with 4 irate, Titanic-sized Bigfoot. What if those creatures were still around? The very thought made me want to heave. Something deep down in my gut that was making me feel decidedly nauseous was telling me a trip to the abandoned Ericsson property at the dead of night was likely not a good idea. We hadn't visited the place in many years and had no idea what it would be like now. When my father was a teenager, the house was in relatively good condition. So when he and Uncle Gareth visited the place, hoping to have some kind of supernatural experience with a ghostly entity, they had been bitterly disappointed, for the house appeared so benevolent. My father had described it as feeling boringly mundane, as it didn't feel or even look like a haunted house. I rather suspected that with the passage of time, things would have changed significantly, as the Ericsson house had fallen into a deep decay, rather like a decomposing skeleton. So it wouldn't feel so benevolent this time, I was most sure, for the natural world would have done a good job in making the place look all the more sinister, as burgeoning ivies would likely be strangling the very foundations of the house, creeping through cracks in the walls, while thorny weeds and overgrown grasses would likely monopolize the property in a tangled chaos that would be far from pretty. I knew a crumbling house like this may have many problems and could potentially be dangerous, especially if part of the roof fell down or something like that. I knew that the house, being in a ramshackle state, would likely really feel like a haunted house, so going there at the witching hour would be more than a little disquieting. But I did not express these misgivings with my brother. There would be no point in doing that. He'd think I was looking for excuses to abandon our nightly soiree. And in truth, that is exactly what I was attempting to do, as I would have given almost anything to discourage him from this trip. As a teenager, I had never once left our house in the middle of the night, to go exploring, so this would be a first for me. I was exceedingly apprehensive about what the night would ultimately bring. So much so that when it was about 10 o'clock, I cautiously slipped into my brother's bedroom, and when I discovered he was sound asleep, I sneakily grabbed his cell phone on his nightstand, which thankfully was unlocked, and I changed the alarm so that instead of going off at 12 o'clock, it would go off at 6:30 in the morning. I sneaked out of his room, feeling extremely proud of myself, because we wouldn't be going to the abandoned house after all, as my brother's alarm clock would awaken him much later in the morning, and by then it would be too late to go off on this ridiculous adventure that my brother had planned. I went to bed feeling reassured that everything would be put on hold. Imagine my surprise when at 12 o'clock my brother was shaking me so vigorously that I woke with a start. "What are you doing, William?" I asked him. "What's going on?" "Have you forgotten?" said William rather cheekily. "We're going to the Erickson house tonight, aren't we? It's 12 o'clock. I'm waking you up. Get dressed and put something warm on. By the way, nice try. I saw you trying to reset my alarm clock on my cell phone so that I wouldn't wake up at the right time. But you underestimated me, Ernest. You forget I'm excited about this trip. Sorry, but your plan didn't work. I figured you'd do something sneaky like this. Turns out I was right. So I went to bed with one eye half open. One thing you are, Ernest, is extremely predictable. I've always said that about you. But I really don't want to do this, William," I said nervously. "Can't we take a rain check? Do it another time, perhaps. I think I feel one of my headaches coming on." "Nice try, Ernest. You sound exactly like Mum when she doesn't want to do something. No one is forcing you to come with me. I'll go alone if I must." "But you know I can't let you go alone," I grumbled. "Good," said my brother, with a cheeky grin on his face. "Now get your clothes on, and we'll sneak outside the laundry window. I've prepared it. I've bent the bar back, so we can squeeze through it quite easily. Don't worry, our adventure will be over soon, and we won't ever have to do it again, if it comes to nothing, and that's a promise." "Oh, that is reassuring," I said sarcastically. "What about the dogs?" I asked suddenly, delighted with the thought that both Rascal and Dash, our two adorable mixed-breed dogs, who slept in the kitchen, would likely make a noise if we left the house in the middle of the night. Their barking would almost certainly get the attention of my father, who would wake up from his slumber, dashing down the staircase with a rifle in his hands, expecting to apprehend an intruder, only to find me and my brother, clandestinely sneaking out of the house by way of the laundry window, like two prowling burglars that were up to no good. I knew my father would never under any circumstances allow us to go out in the middle of the night like this, especially if he knew we were retracing his footsteps when he'd been a teenager, in the hope of encountering a Bigfoot like he had done all those years before. If he had an inkling of what we were up to, he would quite literally have lost it with us, because even after all these years, his encounter with the Bigfoots had shaken him to the core, and I don't think he ever got over it. "Oh, that's all sorted," said my brother. "I've given Dash and Rascal bones to keep them busy. They won't make a noise when we leave. They'll be too preoccupied with their chewing. I gave them the bones a moment ago, and they're very distracted. You know what those two are like about bones." My brother had it all figured out perfectly, as I knew he was right. Our two dogs, when they started chewing bones, would never make a commotion, even when we left the house, as once they got their teeth into those juicy bones, their attention would be engaged otherwise, and we could jump on the roof to our heart's content, and they would be unlikely to even acknowledge us. I will admit that when me and William left our parents' house that night, after successfully sneaking through the laundry window, I was clandestinely praying that my father would get up and our cover would be blown. I would rather face his wrath than embrace the unknown. I could imagine my father storming into the laundry room with a formidable glare on his face, asking us what the hell we thought we were doing. But that sadly never happened. I knew unequivocally our father would not allow us to go off on a nightly soiree like this, as my parents were reasonably strict and expected us to be in bed by 10:30, as they were determined that we would get good grades at school, which wouldn't happen if we were sleep-deprived. Unfortunately, Luck was not on my side that night, for my parents failed to wake up, even though my father was a reasonably light sleeper. The dogs did not bark, and nothing appeared to give us away, almost as if the night itself was bearing our secret away, rather like a squirrel with its acorns, encouraging us to merge seamlessly with the ghostly shadows that ubiquitously haunt the witching hours. Me and William wasted no time when we were greeted by the nudges of chilly air. We grabbed our bicycles from the yard shed, and with clumsy, rather ungainly movements, made a substantial amount of rattling noises, as moving bicycles from a shed is never an easy endeavour. Alas, the noises we made didn't cause any lights in our home to suddenly go on, or for the indistinct silhouette of my father to lean out of the upstairs bedroom window and look out at the night to see what was going on. For had he done that, he'd have likely seen some suspicious movements and come downstairs at once to investigate, with his hunting rifle at the ready. None of this happened. All seemed very quiet and subdued, as if the night was holding its breath, so that we could be cloaked in its tenebrific fog that seemed to be swallowing us whole, for the darkness was clinging to us like the ethereal strings of a spider web. Moments later we were out on the road, our torches illuminating the road ahead. At this point I was very much wide awake and alert. My only thought was that I wanted to get this trip to the abandoned Erickson property over and done with once and for all. And once it was over, I hoped my younger brother would never bug me again when he came to the realization that our visit to the abandoned property had been very unfruitful, apart from robbing us of a good night's sleep. On the bike ride, I kept reassuring myself that nothing untoward would ever happen, but I couldn't shake off an ominous feeling that began to creep up from the pit of my stomach to the back of my throat, like a rather rapid-growing viral infection. It was so dark on our bicycle ride, so I was thankful that our torches cast the dark curtains of fog away, so that we could see our way clearly. But when I glanced towards the trees that fringed both sides of the dusty road, I could feel a heaviness enveloping my heart. I didn't want to be doing this. Ostensibly, the Milky Way wasn't ungenerous. I mean, there was a resplendent glaze of silvery glitter in the sky, and a moon did come out to dance once in a while, like a bride on her wedding day, wearing a shimmering ivory gown. So the night wasn't as intimidating as it could have been, although it was still extremely dark and oppressive. Where we lived at the time, the properties were far apart, most situated on sizable plots of land. Some people happened to own horses, so we lived in an area with a lot of friendly horse riding and ATV trails. For me personally, it seemed to take an age to get to the Ericksons' abandoned house. Every minute seemed to last like a lifetime. Soon we were cycling down the long overgrown driveway, through the trees where things got significantly darker, for the overhang blocked out the moonlight and stole away some of the light of our torches. So even though we'd reached our due destination, this part of the ride had been far from pleasant. The Erickson house was so much worse than I could have ever envisaged it to be. It was hard to believe that a decrepit, dilapidated house like this had once been a delightful family home. For even though the darkness skillfully hid many of its obvious imperfections, I could see that the house was rapidly descending into rampant decay. I couldn't help but think how sad it was that the Ericksons had allowed this to happen. It rather felt as if me and my brother William were standing in a space that was so sadly forgotten by time, lost in its own tragic melancholia. When my father had visited the Erickson property all those years ago as a teenager, the house had been in reasonably good condition. He told me and my brother that there had been nothing spooky or unsettling about the place, so much so they emphatically believed that such a benign house could not be haunted at all. But how different things were now, for the hands of time had done little to soften the ambience of the house. It stood before us like a dishevelled old woman, wearing pitiful rags under the soft prisms of moonlight. It was haunting. The rambling creepers that climbed across the walls with their angry tentacles stuffed their gnarled, grubby fingers through areas of the roof and windows, making the house appear all the more menacing and extremely unapproachable. It felt as if hostile, malevolent eyes were indignantly watching us from behind dusty windows that were covered in cobwebs, while wooden panels that framed the windows appeared diseased and ravaged by damp. I was glad I couldn't see the true extent of this excessive decay, for the night had rendered it less fierce. But nevertheless, an uncertainty began to claw at my throat. My heart thundered violently in my ears, for there was something about the house that was so sinister, so desperately unwelcoming. A little voice in my gut was nudging me and warning me to stay well away. But expressing those thoughts to my brother would be pointless. I had to go through this crazy adventure with him, but never again, I told myself very firmly. "It looks like a haunted house," I said to my brother. "I really don't want to go in there. I'm not sure it'll be safe. The place is falling apart. Let's go home. Please, let's go home." "Oh, change the record, Ernest, will you? Here we go again. You're so predictable," said my brother sarcastically, rolling his eyes in exasperation. "Are you a pussycat or what? You promised you would come with me tonight. I told you I'd never ask you again. It's a once-only favour. And you're here now, so we might as well go through with this. Calm down," he said, slapping me across the back, as if I was a kid that needed some encouragement. I didn't appreciate being patronised and belittled like this, but I bit my lip and said nothing. There was no point in having an argument with my brother. "I'm sure you can do this, Ernest," he said to me encouragingly. "Something just doesn't feel right, William," I said. "Good, I'm glad you feel like that. I feel it too. Maybe we'll have a Bigfoot encounter after all. You know what people say about Bigfoot encounters? That something doesn't feel right, and then voila, it happens. They encounter the creature. That could be our story tonight." "If we don't encounter Bigfoot," I said sarcastically, "we may have an encounter with a leaky roof or some treacherous damp floorboards that are determined to eat at our feet." "We'll be careful," said my brother. "Come on, let's find the door. Everything is so desperately overgrown, it's hard to see it." We did eventually find the door, covered in burgeoning ivy, which was keeping it firmly closed by heavy vines. But we began to rip them away, and my brother kicked at the door, and parts of the door came apart. The wood was so rotted. The door flung open with a mighty creak, and then we were in the empty house. I was glad most of the furniture had been removed a long time ago, but the walls were peeling. The house smelt musty and damp. The curtains on the windows were torn to shreds. Everywhere we walked, the floorboards beneath us creaked and groaned. Cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and the corners of the walls began to tickle at our faces. I nearly screamed when a couple of rats scurried away from us. "I don't like it in here one bit," I told my brother nervously. "That's the point of this adventure, Ernest. It's not meant to be enjoyable. It's an experience to be spooked out of our minds. That's why we're here right now." Moments later we entered what I assume was Tony Erickson's bedroom, when he had been a young boy. There was no furniture in the room, other than what probably was a quality worn-out bureau at one stage, but it appeared to be falling apart, and was thickly caked in dust, so all the objects on display looked as if they were buried under desert sand. "Remember Dad telling us about the strange stone artifact on display on the bureau? I wonder what it is. It looks very interesting, don't you think? Like something you might find in a war zone." "It's still here," said my brother. "I wonder what Dad would think if he was to come back here again." Me and my brother started exploring one room from the next, employing the light of our torches to subdue the dark shadows. The house really was falling apart, and was in appalling condition. The wooden floor beneath our feet creaked and groaned, and there were parts of it that were rotting and falling apart. I soon got used to the unsettling sound. We investigated every room, and even began to climb the crumbling staircase, which certainly was a risk. I was beginning to relax. I reassured myself that the paradoxical Bigfoot encounter that my father and his brother had experienced all those years ago in this very house would never happen to us. My brother was, of course, a perennial optimist in that regard. I was pretty sure he was going to lose interest in this ridiculous nightly mission, and soon we would be back home, slipping back into our warm beds, and back into our comfortable lives. As I was thinking this, we heard a loud banging coming from the front door, even though most of it was missing. It was as if someone with powerful fists was slamming at it very aggressively. It made me jump out of my skin. The first words that came out of my mouth were, "What the hell?" My brother's eyes responded in kind, by widening, but I noticed that there was no fear in them. He looked absolutely thrilled, almost as if all his Christmases had come at once. "Oh my God!" he said. "It's Bigfoot! I know it is! It's Bigfoot! He's coming to scare us away! This is so cool! Brace yourself for an encounter!" At that quintessential moment, I could have slapped William across the face. I felt so annoyed with him. He was outrageously enthusiastic, rather like an athlete climbing a high building, getting extremely excited about the possibility that one slip-up and he could almost certainly fall to his death. I couldn't understand how my brother could be such a thrill-seeker like this. That was when what was left of the door was violently thrust open. I heard wood breaking, and there was nowhere to hide. So I just stood there, frozen to the spot, not knowing what to do or how to react. Then there she was, a very powerful female Bigfoot. Was I even seeing right, I wondered? This had to be a dream. It couldn't be real. But she was larger than life, and she was real, and she was standing there, very, very silently, looking at us through dark, earnest eyes. My brother thrust his torchlight directly into her face, which she didn't appreciate for a second, for the light appeared to annoy her, and she waved the torchlight away from her eyes, so that my brother quit shining the obtrusive light directly into her face. I could see my brother's eyes widened as he saw the Bigfoot, and I kid you not, there was a huge triumphant grin on his face. The female Bigfoot was so impressive in size and stature, so much so she almost took my breath away. She was gargantuan, with powerful overlong arms, extremely sturdy shoulders, and a robust physique that was completely rippled with muscle. She was so sturdy and so powerfully built like a rhino or bear, only she was so human-like and covered in long flowing dark hair. I began to tremble in my boots when I saw her dark, shadowy, ghost-like physique. But as my eyes adjusted to the light of her face, I took her all in. She was not remotely aggressive. Her face was so human, but earnest and rippled with concern. And then she spoke to us, in an unorthodox language that I couldn't understand. But miraculously the words in my head began to be translated into English. "Kilatika kwansi, han sokolo, masifani, likasintwa." "You need to leave now. It's not safe in here. This place could explode." She began beckoning for us to leave, and then said, "Kilatwansi, lutolopo." "Don't come back here again, under any circumstances." The female Bigfoot was calm and firm in her words. She stood back for a moment, allowing us to pass her by. At this point I was so stunned, so overawed by her, I didn't know how to react. I could not fathom that this majestic Bigfoot was so emotionally intelligent, so wise. She had engaged in telepathic conversation with the both of us, and I couldn't believe this was happening. It almost felt as if we were caught up in a dream. It was so surreal. I could see William was caught up in the same mesmerized state that I was. He stared at the female Bigfoot with wide, appreciative eyes, as if he was trying to snap her memory, like a photograph in his head that he never ever wanted to forget. "Kilakwi, hikasikwa, chikaso." "You must leave now," said the Bigfoot. "Don't come back. It's not safe." She watched us as we moved past her, running towards our bicycles, which we mounted, and then we began to cycle down the road. I glanced briefly over my shoulders to watch the female Bigfoot. She was just standing there, very stoically. She nodded at me as if to say goodbye. Everything about her was so gentle, so serene. There was nothing about her energy that made me feel remotely afraid, despite her huge size. In the nights that followed, the most extraordinary thing happened. Me and my brother would experience exactly the same dreams, where we were visited by the same female Bigfoot, telling us under no circumstance to go back to the Erickson house, as it wasn't safe. We compared notes, and our dreams were identical. We were both very overawed by our encounter, and never wanted to talk about it with anyone. It would seem that no matter whether you have a good or bad encounter with a Bigfoot, it certainly has a notable impact on your life. You would think you'd want to share your paradoxical experience with someone else, but we did not want to. I guess I understood then why my father had taken years to share his encounter with us. I did, of course, often wonder why the female Bigfoot we'd encountered had been so desperately determined for us to leave the Erickson house, so much so that she'd even entered our dreams to warn us about it. Little did I know that one day answers would actually be forthcoming, so much so that the puzzle pieces would finally come together and actually fit. Me and my brother had wisely chosen not to share with anyone what had happened to us on the night we'd slipped out of the house to go exploring the Erickson property. It had been my brother's rather vain, irrational hope that we would encounter a mob of angry Bigfoot, like my father and his brother had done. But instead we'd encountered the most beautiful female Bigfoot. And when I say beautiful, I mean that because she genuinely had the face of an angel. "It's our secret, do you understand, Ernest?" William said to me. "No one must know what happened to us, not even Dad. For a start, he'd probably be angry if he knew we went to the abandoned Erickson house at the dead of night like we did. But also this experience was special. It happened to the both of us. It's very personal, so don't blab about it to anyone. I'm relying on you to keep this a secret." "Are you worried that if we told people our story they wouldn't believe it?" I asked my brother. "No, absolutely not," said William, shaking his head. "I don't actually care what other people think or believe. If they were to laugh at me, it would be no skin off my nose, and I wouldn't give a toss. That female Bigfoot was special. She was so kind but very firm. She didn't chase us away aggressively, like the 4 Bigfoots chased Dad and Uncle Gareth away from the Ericksons' abandoned house. She was dignified in the way she told us to leave. She was graceful. But something is going on at the Erickson property, and I'd really like to know what it is. But I don't think we ever will know. But I guess those Bigfoots must have known something about the place, and I guess I'm going to have to be okay with that." "I understand perfectly," I told my brother, "only because, believe it or not, incongruously I feel exactly the same way. We won't talk about this again. My lips are sealed. But like you, I'm also profoundly curious as to what it is about the Erickson house that made the Bigfoots drive so many people away from it. I was wondering if perhaps the house is a portal of some kind that lets things into our reality, and Bigfoots don't want anyone going near it. I mean, I get the distinct impression Bigfoots appear to have an extrasensory perception and know things that we obviously don't. I also have the same impression of Bigfoot," my brother told me. "I've been thinking about this an awful lot. I genuinely believe those Bigfoots that scared the bejesus out of Uncle Gareth and Dad did not do so because they were being malevolent, but because they knew something wasn't right with the Erickson house. Maybe we'll never know what's going on there, but some mysteries remain unsolved, and this is probably going to be one of them." 2 years went by, and I learnt from my mother that the Erickson property was finally being sold and was soon to be bulldozed. One day when we were sitting at the breakfast table on a Saturday morning, and my mother was dishing up blueberry pancakes for us, which we were eating with a plethora of maple syrup and crispy bacon, my father had picked up the local paper, and I heard him say, "By Jove, I can't believe it." "What can't you believe?" asked my mother. "It's the old Erickson property," said my father. "What about it?" asked my mother. "Well, apparently they found an unexploded bomb in the house. Would you believe it? I believe it was very dangerous. It had the potential to go off at any time. I gather Tony Erickson, all those years ago, found it in a field and brought it back home, thinking it was a benign artifact. He placed it on his bureau in his bedroom, along with seashells, stones, and collections of arrowheads to put on display in his bedroom. He had no idea, of course, he'd brought home with him a very dangerous bomb that could potentially go off at any time. I mean, it looked harmless enough. I saw it myself, and I very much liked it. Thankfully, none of his collectible knickknacks were moved from the house when the furniture was taken, which is a relief, because if that thing had been manhandled for too long, it could have exploded and killed people, which is a dreadful thought. But I don't understand, my mother asked. How can someone not know a bomb is a bomb? Surely when you look at one, you know what it is. Because, love, very often a bomb or a landmine can be looked on as something else, like a stone or a piece of concrete. All the time while the Ericsons were living in the house, they were living with a bomb in their midst that could have gone off. I can understand why a young boy would pick it up and consider it a treasurable collectible. He had no idea that he'd brought a dangerous bomb into the house. I cannot believe me and my brother Gareth were messing around in the place when a bomb could potentially have gone off. The paper is saying the expert is baffled that it didn't explode and go off a long time ago. They managed to secure it before they bulldozed the house. Me and my brother looked at each other in shocked surprise. We remembered the Bigfoot telling us it wasn't safe in the Ericson house and not to go back. I realized she must have picked up on the energy of the unexploded bomb, which may have been why a mob of Bigfoots had probably driven the Ericsons from their home, along with my father and my Uncle Gareth, who was still traumatized by the experience, not knowing, of course, that the Bigfoots had actually tried to help him. I realized the female Bigfoot we had encountered had led us away from danger, a crumbling ruin of a home that contained a deadly explosive. I have to say the Ericson property was finally bulldozed. A new house was erected in its place, and the new owners have lived there for many years and have not been chased away from the premises, which leads me to believe that the Bigfoots really did sense the danger that the bomb imposed, and as a consequence, they frightened everyone away from the Ericson property. So sometimes a dangerous Bigfoot may be being that way just to protect you. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.